Hey there. What is going on, people? Welcome back to my Vault Hunters 1.18 starter guide. Today, even though it has been a while since it came out, we are taking a look at some of the new stuff that has come with Update 9. Keyword being some, because Update 9 brought a whole lot of new stuff and reworked a whole lot of old stuff. I'm going to try and be as concise as I can, but if you notice that I missed something, please tell me in the comments below. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin. Starting us off, we have some quick changes that come with updating your world from Update 8 to Update 9. Any and all skill points you had before the update have been completely reset, and also any skill points you had that were obtained using skill orbs have been completely removed, so now your total amount of skill points should equal your vault level. As compensation, you will be returned 4 black opal and 1 extraordinary Beniatite for each skill point you had attained with a skill orb. Any skill orbs, skill shards, or skill essence you still have are now considered legacy items, but you can still put them in the soul diffuser for soul shards. Speaking of soul shards, they have been reworked a little bit. The amount of soul shards you can get from killing mobs has been increased by a whole 1000%. However, the soul chance modifier you get on your vault gear has been reduced heavily to balance this increase in soul shards. Your old vault gear modifiers are still the same, so you can still use them if you'd like. Also, mobs that are able to drop soul shards in the vault have this little purple effect around them, making it easier to distinguish between mobs that do and mobs that don't drop soul shards. Since soul shards have been reworked, that means the black market has also been reworked. Purchasing an offer will no longer reset the timer. Instead, it will just gray it out, which means you can buy a lot more stuff. All of the items in the black market reset after 2 hours now, too. Also, this unknown item here has increased to 1500 soul shards, but all ingredient items have been removed from the black market table, so you're more likely to get something good from picking this option out of the others. Another thing that has been reworked quite a bit is vault gear and vault gear crafting. Vault gear crafting was only reworked slightly so that now gaining proficiency is more exponential rather than linear, and the requirement to max out proficiency on a vault gear piece has been reduced. This buff is added onto proficiencies that I've already started, so if you have a proficiency already on a vault gear piece, it should be a little bit higher than before the update. Also, the vault alloy crafting recipe only requires 2 vaultite ingots now, so it should be a lot easier to get started with vault gear crafting. Vault gear itself got a much larger rework. First off, the implicit attack damage for both swords and axes have been reduced and are now the exact same. The extra attack damage you get from the prefixes, though, have been increased. Also, the tier of the modifier rolls has been hidden by default and will now only show after holding Alt on your keyboard. They have completely removed the cleave prefix from axes, making axes a less appealing option. To somewhat make up for the huge nerf to axes, they will now have another implicit called attack range, which allows you to attack from further away. Attack range is also able to roll as a suffix on a sword though, which just kinda makes axes worse swords. I have no clue what they were thinking with this, but I'm sure they'll rebalance this in another update. At the moment, it just seems swords are way better. Moving on, vault gear modifiers have been changed to fit in better with the other stuff added in this update. Chaining now competes with the attack damage prefix, so if you want chaining, you will most likely have to sacrifice attack damage and vice versa. Thorn's chance and Thorn's damage has now become an implicit on shields. The damage dealt with Thorns is based on the shield's Thorn damage, as well as any additional damage increases from sources like Holy, Spiteful, or Baneful. Speaking of, a lot of people were apparently confused on the naming scheme of these effects, and so now they are just called Undead damage, Illager damage, and Arthropods damage. Additionally, they added a 4th effect, Nether damage, which, you guessed it, does more damage to Nether-themed mobs. The effect clouds, like poison and healing, now scale more accurately and deal more damage or heal more with each tier of cloud. There's also a new effect cloud added to the game called Fear, which works just like a mini taunt fear effect, making mobs not attack you for a short duration of time. So do you guys remember the Fatal Strike modifier? Yeah, I don't really either, but anyways, it is now being replaced with a new mechanic called Lucky Hit. Starting at level 25, you will begin seeing Lucky Hit Chance as one of the suffixes you get on swords, axes, and shields. Upon your Lucky Hit triggering, an effect will occur, depending on what you tailor it to do in the Lucky Hit talent group, which I'll be covering a bit later. Basically, you can either do more damage, regain health, regain mana, or activate a cleave effect when you hit a mob. Also, quick side note, lucky hit or any other on-hit effects like effect clouds, stunning, or chaining will not activate if you do a critical hit on a mob. You have to slash them normally for any of the on-hit effects to trigger. I guess vault tools aren't exactly vault gear, but they've had some changes to them as well. You will no longer need a bunch of mining speed on your vault tool in order to instantly mine chests in a vault. Now all you need is the correct affinity and efficiency 5, which means you can get this way earlier on in your playthrough. Also, the amount of reach that can be obtained in a vault now is hard capped at 7 as to prevent people from breaking spawners just out of range of being activated. There is no limit outside the vault for how far you can reach, so it is still a viable modifier on your vault tools. On the topic of spawners, let's go ahead and talk about some of the changes that have been made to the vault. So, the way mobs spawn in the vault has been tweaked a bit. Every single spawner in the vault, besides challenge room spawners and dungeon spawners, are now a fizzle spawner. You can say goodbye to mining a bunch of spawners to get cage dust for eye spawners too, since now you can craft cage dust instead. On top of this, the mobs that spawn now fall into one of 4 groups. They can be a horde type, which is a large amount of weak mobs, however they don't do much damage. They can be a tank type, which is a small amount of mobs, but they have a lot of health. They can be an assassin, which is an average amount of mobs that do a lot of damage. Or they can be mixed, which is just a random bunch of the other 3 groups. You'll notice that the basic mobs look a bit different, and they take on characteristics of the theme of the vault, which makes augments even more useful for trying to complete your bounties. To all the infinite water bucket users out there, I'm sorry to say, but you can no longer just flood POIs with water, as now mobs will pathfind through the water to get to you. Enough about the mobs though, onto actual vault things. There is no longer any powdered snow or lava that is generated within the themes that used to have them. Also, any sort of liquid that comes from these themes, like the honey theme, will no longer have pools that are deeper than 1 block. On top of the daytime village room and the nighttime village room, we now have the 3rd variant, which is the dawn village room, which boasts ornate chests instead of living or gilded chests. You can tell if a village room is a dawn room because of the rainbow pattern along the walls. Challenge rooms and dungeons rooms will now spawn illagers, which finally makes illager damage have a use in the vault. Dungeons now also contain these alchemy archives, which work just like the modifier archive except for vault potions, which I'll talk about later on. Do note that these will only show up after you have reached level 50. Scavenger vaults have been made a little bit easier before level 75. You see, because of the way the scavenger vaults were pushed back so that you could only get them after level 50, they decided to decrease the amount of items needed to complete the objective, and then scavenger vaults become how they were in Update 8 after level 75. Oh yeah, I completely forgot to mention this. After level 50, you'll start discovering strong boxes, which are chests that have this little lock around them. Unlike normal chests, strong boxes cannot be instantly mined, and they can only be mined if you have the correct affinity on your vault tool. Once you do break them, all of the loot comes out at once. Other than a few changes here or there, that's pretty much everything that's new with the vault. So let's move on to the most exciting part of the update, that being the abilities, talents, and all the new expertise. Starting us off, we have the vault abilities, and we are missing a few. Namely, they removed Vein Miner Fortune, Base Hunter, and Mega Jump Drill. So they decided to remove Vein Miner Fortune because they didn't want to force people to take the option that guaranteed more resources overall, and so that has been replaced in the form of the Fortunate Expertise, which again I'll talk about later. They removed the Base Hunter ability and made it so that the base version will just highlight wooden chests so that people will have to make a choice on what type to focus on. And they removed Mega Jump Drill because, yeah, nobody used that piece of shit anyways. Also, really quick thing, they changed the amount of skill points needed to fully max out an ability. In Update 8, you had abilities like Nova that you could dump 32 skill points into, but now the highest amount of skill points for an ability is 10. This was done to make way for the new talents that were added, but more on that later. Anyways, they changed a lot of abilities in Update 8 to fit with the new ones now, so let's cover those first. Stonefall got an interesting rework. It still completely negates fall damage after level 2, but will now apply a knockback to any nearby mobs when you land. Surefoot Stonefall negates part of the fall damage, but will deal damage to nearby mobs depending on how far you fall, multiplied by your weapon's damage. And Cold Snap Stonefall will reduce all fall damage at max level, and then will freeze any nearby mobs when you land. Base Dash has gotten a slight nerf so that now you won't go as far as you did before. But now, Dash has a new specialization called Dash Warp. This will shoot an arrow that will teleport you to the location where it lands. If you hit a mob or another player when you shoot this arrow, you'll end up switching places with them. Rampage Chain had its number of chaining targets increased from 3 at max level to 8, which is quite a substantial buff. Ghost Walk had its cooldown significantly increased but now keeps you invisible for a longer period of time. Its new specialization Ghost Walk Spirit has its cooldown significantly decreased, however it keeps you invisible for a shorter period of time, and breaking a block or opening a chest can cancel the effect. Taunt has finally gotten a buff. In addition to angering the mobs around you, you get an increase in damage during that time. Taunt also has a new specialization called Taunt Charm, which will charm a certain amount of mobs and make them attack any other mobs for the duration, and then return back to being hostile after. Any charmed mob will not attack you during the duration, so it's kinda similar to Taunt Fear in that way. Oh boy, Monoshield finally got a specialization. Monoshield Retribution directs a percentage of incoming damage to your mana pool, but your next attack deals a percentage of the damage absorbed in a radius around your target. Nova ended up getting a nerf because a lot of high-level players were only using Nova and not using anything else, so now its damage scaling has lowered tremendously. Nova Frost got a bit of a buff because everyone was just using Taunt Fear, so mobs hit by Nova Frost will still be frozen for the duration, but then they'll get a new effect called Hypothermia, which will permanently slow them and damage them every 3 seconds. That's all of the abilities that have been reworked. Let's move on to the cool new ones that have been added. Starting us off, we have Shell, which looks like it has completely replaced Tank from Update 8. Base Shell will give you a chance to stun any mob that hits you. Shell Porcupine will increase the amount of thorns damage you do, and also give you durability resistance, which I super appreciate them doing this, as now we finally have a way to do the 1.16 Porcupine build without my armor breaking every other vault run. And lastly we have Shell Quill, which will increase your thorns damage a tiny bit, but will now chain your thorns so that you can hit multiple targets. Next up we have Totem Rejuvenation and all of its specializations. So basically, you plop this totem down, and depending on which type of totem you have, it'll do something different. The base totem will heal you and any other player every second as long as you are within the radius of the totem, which means we finally have another ability besides Rampage Vampire that could compete with heal in the vault. Totem Hatred will shorten the radius of the totem, but will apply a percentage of your damage every so often to any mob within the totem's range. This damage can trigger any sort of on-hit effects like effect clouds or stunning with the exception of Lucky Hit. Totem Spirit will regenerate the mana of any player within its range every second, and Totem Wrath will increase the damage of any player within its range. Moving on, we have Empower, and this looks like a really fun ability. It'll give you and any player within its radius around yourself a percentage of increased movement speed while the ability is active. Its specialization, Empower Ice Armor, will slow down any mob within a radius around yourself while the ability is active. Next in line we have the unanimously agreed upon favorite ability of this update, the Javelin. This ability shoots a javelin towards where you are looking, similar to shooting an arrow, and deals a percentage of your damage and knocks back the mob when it hits them. Javelin Piercing will do less damage and won't knock back the mob, however now it can travel through a certain amount of mobs without stopping. Javelin Scatter is probably the most interesting, dealing a little bit of your damage but allowing you to scatter a bunch of bouncing javelins by bouncing the main javelin off a surface or a mob. And finally, Javelin Sight deals the least amount of damage, however it scans the area in a radius on impact like a mini hunter ability, revealing chests and making mobs glow. For our final new ability, we have Smite. Base Smite will periodically strike a mob within range with lightning, dealing almost 4 times your base damage at max level. Smite Archon will strike any mob that touches you with lightning, dealing a percentage of your damage. Last but not least, Smite Thunderstorm will rain down a lot of lightning on a mob within range, dealing 3 times your base damage at max level. Ooh, alright, so that was everything about abilities. Let's move on to talents. Now the talents aren't too different from before. You got your basic ones like Speed and Haste, which have had their costs change a little bit. And you also got some new ones like Witchery and Sorcery, which are all very self-explanatory. What's different is these boxes here, which are the grouped talents. These focus on specific abilities, extra effects, or just general talents that have some sort of correlation. Each of these group talents have a maximum amount of skill points that you are able to spend inside that group. So for example, I can dump all my skill points into whatever from the Javelin category, but once I've reached 10 total, I cannot add any more. This allows you to mix and match different abilities so you can have multiple different playstyles. Where things really get interesting is when we start talking about expertise. Expertises are very similar to talents, and even some of these expertise were talents before Update 9, such as Unbreakable, Experienced, and Bartering. These types of upgrades have been moved to expertise because the dev team didn't want them to be a direct competitor to abilities and talents. You gain expertise points passively every 5 levels, meaning you can get up to 20 expertise points if you are at max level. Think of expertise as more permanent upgrades to your playthrough as opposed to easily changeable talents. You can eventually change your expertise using a neutralizer, however those cost a whole 4 Omega Pogs to make, so you should really be confident in your choice when you make it. Alright, so you remember those vault potions I was talking about? Yeah, they became the 9th research group right after I just released a video talking about the best mods from the 8 research groups in the game. It's fine, I'm not angry. Anyways, back to those vault potions. So, vault potions have been introduced as an additional way to heal inside of the vault. Why not use regular healing potions, you might ask? Well, every time you drink a vanilla healing potion inside the vault, Valera, the vault god, will sap the strength of your healing abilities, making them heal less and less, all the way up to 80% healing reduction. So yeah, it's just best to use a vault potion instead. Any given vault potion will only have 6 uses while inside the vault. These uses will reset after you leave the vault. Vault potions have 2 forms. They can either recharge a use after 5 minutes or recharge a use after you've killed 150 mobs. It's up to you to decide which one you want, but both will heal you the same amount as long as they are the same type. Oh yeah, vault potions have 4 different types from least healing to most healing, which are the vial, the potion, the mixture, and the brew. Each vault potion, with the exception of the vial, is locked behind its corresponding research in the Researches tab. Only after unlocking a potion's research are you able to craft it yourself. So you're probably thinking to yourself, alright, well I'll just use heal instead, I don't really need a potion to help me in the vault. And that's where the alchemy table comes in. If you hold shift over your potion, you'll notice that there's an empty suffix, and this is how you can add additional bonus effects to your potions. Using the alchemy table, you can add these effects like soul chance, item rarity, and item quantity onto your potion, and you will get those effects for a small duration of time after you drink the potion. Okay, let's dial it back a bit. We got a few new quality of life blocks that were added, so let's talk about those. Right here we have this identification stand, which is crafted with 3 vault diamonds, 2 obsidian, a lectern, and this identification tome, which can be crafted with 6 skill essence, 2 vault diamonds, and a book. What this essentially does is automatically roll any unidentified vault gear you have in your inventory, so you don't have to roll each one individually. Very simple and somewhat useful for people who get like 30 pieces of gear in one vault run. Next up, we have the skill altar, which can be crafted with a glass pane, red wool, 2 vault essence, and 3 black chromatic steel ingots. This essentially acts like a wardrobe, but for skills instead of armor sets. What you can do is save your current abilities and talents into the skill altar, and then switch around your talents a little bit, maybe go for a different playstyle, and then save this new set of abilities and talents in the skill altar. And then as long as you have enough regret orbs here, you can easily switch between them no problem. For our final block, we have the Vault Enchanter, which can be crafted with 2 emeralds, a book, 2 chromatic iron blocks, and an enchantment table. Real question, are you team enchanting table or team enchantment table? Let me know in the comments below. But anyways, this table completely removes the need for both librarian villagers and an enchantment table, as you can put any gear piece in here and you can do max level enchants for the cost of 5 emeralds and 1 of your levels. That is all the big changes that have come in this update. Time for some of the more discrete changes, starting with the new game rules that have been added. /game rule vault mode is how to determine what happens upon a death inside the vault without beginner's grace. Casual mode means that when you die, you keep all of the items but will suffer a durability penalty. Normal mode means that your spirit will spawn, but you will not keep your items upon death. and hardcore mode means that your spirit will never spawn and you will not keep your items upon death. / game mode vault crystal mode is for people who want to either make it way easier to get vault crystals or make it way harder to get vault crystals. Infinity means all you need to do to get a vault crystal is apply a redstone signal to the vault altar with a vault rock. Normal is the basic Vault Hunters experience. Grindy scales the vault altar ingredients by 2, and Extreme scales the vault altar ingredients by 3. / game mode vault loot is for people who want to hasten their playthrough of Vault Hunters. Normal is the basic Vault Hunters experience. Plenty scales the loot up by ×2, and the Extreme scales the loot up by ×3. They also added one more vault difficulty called Piece of Cake, which can be changed by using /the vault difficulty piece of cake. To end off this video, I'm going to be covering the miscellaneous changes or additions that really didn't have a place in this video. And I'm going to be doing this in the form of a lightning round. 3, 2, 1, and go! Increase base mana regenerations from 0.75 per second to 1 per second. Remove the death penalty multiplier for spirits. Normal vault fighters now have slower movement speeds than the player. Living chests can now contain room inscriptions. Fireworks no longer work inside the vault. Added driftwood logs and planks. Lower the cost of Simple Storage Network and removed crafting interface and import-export cables to fix performance issues. Lowered the cost of refined storage and applied energetics 2 from 6 to 4 knowledge points to make up for the Simple Storage Network nerf. Added a vanilla recipe to craft cobwebs. Crafted vault trinkets are now guaranteed to roll 20 uses. Magnet durability has been heavily buffed. Mod-specific damage now stacks on weapons. And the Vault Room's catacombs are now randomly generated. Okay. And with that, I believe that is everything you need to know about what's new in Update 9 of Vault Hunters 1.18. Episode 4 of Mastermind is out by the time you're watching this, so go and check that out if you haven't already. Link is in the description. Please let me know down in the comments what you'd like to see from me next. If you found this video helpful in any way, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe. But anyways guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later. See ya.